Chapter 12. Just beyond the breakfast station, we overtook a Mormon immigrant train of 33 wagons, and tramping wearily along and driving their herd of loose cows were dozens of coarse-clad and sad-looking men, women, and children who had walked as they were walking now, day after day, for 8 lingering weeks, and in that time had compassed the distance our stage had come in 8 days and 3 hours, 798 miles. They were dusty, uncombed, hatless, bonnetless, and ragged, and they did look so tired. After breakfast we bathed in Horse Creek, a previously limpid, sparkling stream, an appreciated luxury, for it was very seldom that our furious coach halted long enough for an indulgence of that kind. We changed horses 10 or 12 times in every 24 hours, changed mules rather, 6 mules, and did it nearly every time in 4 minutes. It was lively work as our coach rattled up to each station. 6 harnessed mules stepped gaily from the stable, and in the twinkling of an eye almost the old team was out and the new one in, and we off and away again. During the afternoon we passed Sweetwater Creek, Independence Rock, Devil's Gate, and the Devil's Gap. The latter were wild specimens of rugged scenery and full of interest. We were in the heart of the Rocky Mountains now. We also passed by Alkali or Soda Lake, and we woke up to the fact that our journey had stretched a long way across the world when the driver said that the Mormons often came there from the great Salt Lake City to haul away Saleratus. He said that a few days gone by they had shoveled up enough pure Saleratus from the ground, it was a dry lake, to load 2 wagons, and that they got these 2 wagon loads of a drug that cost them nothing to Salt Lake. They could sell it for 25 cents a pound. In the night we sailed by a mostly notable curiosity, and one we had been hearing a good deal about for a day or two and were suffering to see. This was what they called a natural ice house. It was August now, and sweltering weather in the daytime, yet at one of the stations the men could scrape the soil off the hillside under the lee of a range of boulders, and at a depth of 6 inches cut out pure blocks of ice, hard, compactly frozen, and clear as crystal. Toward dawn we got under way again, and presently we sat with raised curtains, enjoying our early morning smoke, and contemplating the first splendor of the rising sun as it swept down the long array of mountain peaks, flushing and gilding crag after crag, and summit after summit, as if the invisible Creator reviewed his grave veterans and they saluted him with a smile. We hove in sight of South Pass City. The hotel keeper, the postmaster, the blacksmith, the mayor, the constable, the city marshal, and the principal citizen and property holder all came out and greeted us cheerily, and we gave him a good day. He gave us a little Indian news and a little Rocky Mountain news, and we gave him some Plains information in return. He then retired to his lonely grandeur, and we climbed up among the bristling peaks and the ragged clouds. South Pass City consisted of 4 log cabins, one of which was unfinished, and the gentleman with all these offices and titles was the chiefest of the 10 citizens of the place. Think of hotel keeper, postmaster, blacksmith, mayor, constable, city marshal, and principal citizen, all condensed into one person and crammed into one skin. Bemis said he was a perfect Allen's revolver of dignities, and he said that if he were to die as postmaster, or as blacksmith, or as postmaster and blacksmith both, the people might stand it. But if he were to die all over, it would be a frightful loss to the community. 2 miles beyond South Pass City we saw for the first time that mysterious marvel which all Western untraveled boys have heard of and fully believed in, but are sure to be astounded at when they see it with their own eyes. Banks of snow in dead summertime. We were now far up toward the sky, and knew all the time that we must presently encounter lofty summits clad in the eternal snow, which was so commonplace a matter of mention in books And yet, when I did see it glisten in the sun on stately domes in the distance, and knew the month was August, and that my coat was hanging up because it was too warm to wear it, I was full of as much amazed as I had never heard of snow in August before. Truly, seeing is believing, and many a man lives a long life through, thinking he believes certain universally received and well-established things, and yet never suspects that if he were confronted by those things once, he would discover that he did not really believe them before, but only thought he believed them. In a little while, quite a number of peaks swung into view with long claws of glittering snow clasping them, and with here and there in the shade, down the mountainside, a little solitary patch of snow looking no larger than a lady's pocket handkerchief, but being in reality as large as a public square. And now, at last, we were fairly in the renowned South Pass, and were whirling gaily along high above the common world. We were perched upon the extreme summit of the great range of the Rocky Mountains, towards which we had been climbing patiently, climbing ceaselessly, and for days and nights together, and about us was gathered a convention of nature's kings that stood 10, 12, even 13,000 feet high. Grand old fellows who would have had stooped to see Mount Washington in the twilight. We were in such an airy elevation above the creeping populations of the earth that now and then, when the obstructing crags stood out of the way, it seemed that we could look around abroad and contemplate the whole great globe, with its dissolving view of mountains and seas and continents stretching away through the mystery of the summer haze. As a general thing, the pass was more suggestive of a valley than a suspension bridge in the clouds, but it strongly suggested the latter at one spot. At that place, the upper third of one or two majestic purple domes projected above our level on either hand, and gave us a sense of a hidden great deep of mountains and plains and valleys down about their bases, which we fancied we might see if we could step to the edge and look over. These sultans of the fastnesses were turbaned with tumbled volumes of clouds, which shredded away from time to time and drifted off, fringed and torn, trailing their continents of shadow after them, and catching presently on an intercepting peak, wrapped it about and brooded there, then shredded away again, and left the purple peak, as they had left the purple domes, downy and white with new-laid snow. In passing, these monstrous rags of cloud hung low and swept along right over the spectator's head, swinging their tatters so nearly in his face that his impulse was to shrink when he came closest. In the one place I speak of, one could look below him upon a world of diminishing crags and canyons, leading down, down and away to a vague plain, with a thread in it which was a road, and bunches of feathers in it which were trees, a pretty picture, sleeping in the sunlight, but with darkness stealing over it and glooming its features deeper and deeper under the frown of a coming storm. And then, while no film or shadow marred the noon brightness of this high perch, he could watch the tempest break forth down and see the lightnings leap from crag to crag and sheeted rain drive from the canyon sides, and hear the thunder and peal and crash and roar. We had this spectacle, a familiar one to many, but to us a novelty. We bowled along cheerily, and presently at the very summit, although it had been all summit to us and all equally level for half an hour or more, we came to a spring which spent its water out through two outlets and sent it in opposite directions. The conductor said that one of those streams, which we were looking at, was just starting on a journey westward to the Gulf of California and the Pacific Ocean, through hundreds and even thousands of miles of desert solitudes. He said that the other was leaving its home towards the snow peaks on a similar journey eastward, and we knew that long after we should have forgotten the simple rivulet, it would still be plodding its patient way down the mountain sides and canyon beds, and between the banks of the Yellowstone, and by would join the broad Missouri and flow unknown plains and deserts and unvisited wildernesses, and at a long, troubled pilgrimage through snags and wrecks and sandbars, and enter the Mississippi, touch the wharves of St. Louis, and still drift on, traversing shoals and rocky channels, then endless chains of bottomless and ample bends, walled with unbroken forests, then mysterious byways and secret passages among the woody islands, then the chain bends again, bordered with wide levels of shining sugar cane in place of the somber forests, then by New Orleans and still other chains and bends, and finally, after 2 long months of daily and nightly harassment, excitement, enjoyment, adventure, and awful peril of parched throats, pumps, and evaporation, pass the Gulf and enter into its rest upon the bosom of the tropic sea, never to look upon its snow peaks again or regret them. I freighted a leaf with a mental message for the friends at home and dropped it in the stream, but I put no stamp on it, and it was held for postage somewhere. On the summit we overtook an immigrant train of many wagons and many tired men and women, and many a disgusted sheep and cow, and the woefully dusty horseman in charge of the expedition. I recognized John. Of all persons in the world to meet on top of the Rocky Mountains, thousands of miles from home, he was the last one I should have looked for. We were schoolboys together and warm friends for years, but a boyish prank of mine had disrupted this friendship, and it had never been renewed. The act of which I speak was this. I had been accustomed to visit occasionally an editor whose room was in the 3rd story of a building and overlooked the street. One day this editor gave me a watermelon, which I made preparations to devour on the spot, but chancing to look out of the window, I saw John standing directly under it, and an irresistible desire came upon me to drop the melon on his head, which I immediately did. I was a loser for it spoilt the melon, and John never forgave me, and we dropped all intercourse and parted. But now we met again under these circumstances. We recognized each other simultaneously, and hands were grasped as warmly as if no coldness had ever existed between us, and no allusion was made to any. All animosities were buried, and the simple fact of meeting a familiar face in that isolated spot so far from home was sufficient to make us forget all things but pleasant ones, and we parted again with a sincere good-byes and God bless you. We had been climbing up the long shoulders of the Rocky Mountains for many tedious hours. We started down them now, and we went spinning away at a round rate, too.